They say a commissar's duty is to instill fear and discipline in the ranks. A senadium. But what do you do when your soldiers already know no fear? When every last trooper under your command is actually eager to charge into hell with a smile. Ititin. Hidden behind a skull masked. It's respirator, welcome to my life. The life of a commissar. I stand amidst an army of the dead, not literally. Not yet. But to the death cores of they have been dead from. It is the day they were born. They fight as if they have nothing to lose, because on you, Chedidate, surrender everything to the Emperor the moment you draw breath. My assignment is to the 317th Siege Regiment. Astra Militarum. I've been with these trench-crawling, shovel-carrying specters for 5 years. 5 years of mud, blood, and chemical fog. 5 years of watching men who barely have a life. To call their own, throw it away in glorious sacrifice at the drop of a hat. And 5 years of trying against all convention and intuition to hold them back. Yes, hold them back. It's an inversion few outside the commissariat would believe. Not a commissar whose primary duty isn't to push cowardly men forward, but to restrain brave men from senseless death. I don't shout. Forward for the Emperor, as much as I find myself barking, "Reachik steady, you fools. Meforiam, not yet damned." If I ever wrote a treatise on my experiences, that might well be the title. Not yet. A commissar's guide to the death course. A dark joke perhaps, but humor is one of the few shields I have left to keep me sane out here on the edge of oblivion. Picture a shattered battlefield under a toxic ash. In sky, the air is unbreathable. A witch's brew of radioactive dust, and nerve agents clings to every stagnant gust of wind. The sun, if it still exists above the perpetual clouds, offers no comfort, only a sickly glow. This is where the excel. We stand in a trench carved from blackened mud that was once fertile ground. Barbed wire and blasted rocket bunkers checker the oath landscape. The smell thrown. The smell would make a hive sewer seem like a pleasure garden. Rotting corpses, cordite, prometheum, the ever-present chemical stink that burns your lungs, even through a rebreather. I have long since stopped gagging on it. I had to be ashamed to retch in front. Is it the nadio of these soldiers who endure it without a word of complaint? After all, they were bred in it. I see them on the firing step, it peering through periscope slit trenches or over the Tito Sarashiti of Tainti or Sentispito Senti Derishitintitintitira parapet, identical gas masks, with haunting glassy eye lenses fixed forward. Long great coats, once blue-gray, now stained black, with soot and grime hanging off thin frames. Bayonets, it glint faintly on the muzzles of their rifles. Always fixed, ready for the next Tito Viseira charge. Each soldier is utterly still, a statue awaiting animation. No nervous fidgeting, no chatter to break the silence. In other regiments, I'd have to silence gossip or banter, remind the men to stay alert. Here, there's nothing but discipline. It and the distant thunder of our heavy guns pounding the enemy lines. The death corps need no reminders. The artillery concussions roll over us. And occasionally the ground shakes with the reciprocating impact of enemy. Shells' dirt patters down into the trench. A claw lands on my overcoat shoulder. I brush it off absent-mindedly. The man next to me, perhaps I should say the boy, for Emperor knows how young some of these soldiers truly are, doesn't even flinch as a shell screams overhead. He just calmly racks the slide of his last gun to clear the dust out of it, as casually as one might swat a fly. I glance at him. Through the circular glass of his mask's eyepiece, I catch a glimpse of pale skin, coldly lit by the gray dawn. I wonder if he's even old enough to shave under there. Possibly not. It's rumored many of these Kriegers haven't seen more than 16 summers. If that, they won't remove the mask to confirm. And it's not my place to ask. He notices me looking. "Commissar," he inquires, voice muffled and monotone. Through the filter. Always formal, always the honorific. Not a quiver of fear or any emotion that I can detect. Emperor's truth. I sometimes think the rebreather modulates out whatever feeling they might have had. I shake my head. "Carry on," I say, feeling slightly foolish, as if he needed my permission to continue being the perfect soldier. When I first arrived to this regiment, I expected the usual challenges of a fresh-faced Commissar in the Imperial. We guard, identify the malcontents and cowards, make a brutal example early on. Asatoid, stamp out any simmering resentment. Us toward the officers or the war, yen taspuni. This is the sacred duty of the official prefectus to ensure no guard unit, muck, falters in the Emperor's service due to a failure of will or faith. Is it on a dozen battlefronts before? I had done just that. I've executed deserters and traitors. Tibishet delivered rousing speeches in Iki, the face of unbeatable odds. Mus inspired terrified men to hold the line or charge. It mucks into the jaws of hell. Mom, I had become adept at the art of taking a regiment of ordinary humans and hardening them with fear and faith. Then came, or more specifically then, I was seconded to the death course of all my prior experience became as obsolete as a lost gun with a dead power pack. These soldiers did not need my fear. They already lived in fear. Fear of failing the Emperor. They did not need my encouragement to fight. They would march into no man's land without a word if ordered, or even without orders if you're not careful. What they needed, though, none of them would ever say it, was a leash. Someone to remind them that victory for the Emperor is not achieved by dying gloriously for its own sake, but by making sure that when they die, it truly accomplishes something. In my first engagement with the 317th, I witnessed something that haunts me still. We were laying siege to an enemy fortress on Valgard's world. A fated industrial moon that had fallen to heretics. The commander, a Colonel Wolf, was determined to take an outer redoubt by nightfall. Our initial bombardments had failed to breach the walls. Any sane commander would have reconsidered, perhaps called for additional artillery, or waited for armored support. Instead, he ordered a full infantry charge. Through a blasted gap in the razor wire, across a field cratered with mines and dotted with heavy bolter nests. It was midday when he gave the order. Satyatia, assault was to commence immediately. Bright sun, or what passed for sun through the haze, be damned. Enemy guns, fully awake and ready. I stood on the fire step and heard him blow his whistle. What followed was equal parts awe-inspiring and horrifying. Hundreds of Death Corps guardsmen climbed from our trench without hesitation as one like. Etriada automata triggered by a single switch. Not a single man hung back. They advanced at a steady run, boots crunching skulls and bones underfoot as they went over the top into hell. I saw the first rank get scythed down by interlocking heavy stubber fire from the fortress emplacements. The next rank simply stepped over the bodies and kept advancing, firing last guns methodically as they closed the distance. Last bolts and bullets filled the air. Soldiers fell. Smoke and dust churned up. The cacophony was deafening even from where I stood. The heretics' munitions tore. Awful gaps in our waves. But nothing stopped the cores. It was madness. It was suicidal. It was working up to a point. The lead elements made it to the base of the fortress wall, far further than I suspect the enemy expected any attackers to reach. But at such cost, too high a cost, I could see piles of dead littering the approach. The living were using the corpses of their fallen comrades as sandbags, hunkering behind the growing mounds of bodies to return fire. My stomach lurched at the sight. In all my years, I had never seen tactics so ghastly, yet so matter-of-fact. To the men of it seemed perfectly natural. The fallen were simply making themselves useful one last time as cover for the living. The colonel was readying the second wave to reinforce. By my estimation, the enemy's guns were still far too intact. A second charge would simply add to the butcher's bill without taking that redoubt. The rational move was to call off the attack, or at least pause to bring up heavy siege guns to punch a hole first. But rationality is not a common virtue in the death corps. Leadership when blood is already in the water.
For them, hesitation is a sin, and an assault once begun must continue until either the objective is taken or no one is left to take it. I realized with a cold clarity that it felt to me to be the voice of reason or failing that the voice of the Emperor's larger purpose. So I did something no commissar ever expects to do. I countermanded a direct attack order of an Imperial Guard colonel. I stepped in front of Colonel Wolf as he was about to blow the whistle again. I put my bolt pistol to his temple. Belay that order, I growled. We will not squander the Emperor's soldiers on a fortification that our guns can reduce by tomorrow. He looked at me from behind his skull mask. I remember seeing my own reflection in those dark lenses. Perhaps he considered shooting me then and there. I later learned some would sooner execute a superior than obey a retreat, viewing any delay as cowardice. But the letter of the commissariat's authority stayed his hand. Technically, I had the right, the duty to prevent outright folly. I told him plainly, "This is my judgment. Pull the men back. Now, Colonel, or I'll execute you for dereliction." It was a gamble and a blasphemous reversal of the usual order of things. Time seemed frozen for an instant. The other staff officers around us stood in stunned silence. I'm sure a few thought I had lost my mind. Perhaps I had, but the colonel slowly lowered his field glass. He gave a curt nod and grudgingly voxed in order to withdraw. Do you know what a withdrawal looks like for the death corps? It's not panic or rout. Oh no, they begrudgingly, almost methodically fell back from that killing field with the same discipline they'd advanced, covering fire, leapfrogging in bounds, dragging their wounded, and even collecting their dead when possible. They treat their dead like comrades. Still, perhaps because to a Krieger, death is no barrier to duty. I oversaw the retreat, feeling hundreds of unseen eyes in those masks, probably wishing to burn a hole through me. It was the first time those soldiers had ever heard the order to fall back. I could sense their confusion, perhaps even disappointment. One trooper, limping with shrapnel in his leg, paused and faced me as the others trudged past. He didn't say a word. He just saluted me, a clenched fist to his chest, then turned and went on. Was it respect for saving who I could, or a gesture of silent reproach? That I denied him a martyr's death that day? I'll never know. In the end, I saved perhaps half the men from annihilation in that assault. We took that fortress 2 days later after a proper bombardment shattered its walls. And we did it with minimal additional casualties, relatively speaking. By standards, that counted as patience. To me, it was just common sense. But that episode cemented my place and purpose in the regiment. I was not just their moral overseer, but their guide rail, keeping this hurtling train of doom from derailing before the destination is reached. Since that day, I've intervened more times than I can count to in their excesses, as the Munitorum charitably calls it. In truth, it often feels like I'm holding back a dam about to burst, and I'm plugging the cracks with my own fingers. Another time on a different world. They all blur together. Ash wastes, trench lines, ruined hives. Pick your nightmare. Our siege marshal planned to flood a hive city's lower levels with lethal gas to flush out a deeply entrenched Jenny Stealer cult, heedless of the fact that there were still tens of thousands of Imperial citizens cowering in those HAB blocks. To him, they were already collateral damage the moment the cult took hold. A regret but an acceptable sacrifice if it delivered victory. It fell to me and the attached Mentorum confessor to argue to beg practically for a different approach. In that case, an appeal to the colonel's sense of duty to the emperors, loyal subjects, and a subtle reminder that wiping out the very people you're trying to save might technically border on heresy carried the day. He relented begrudgingly. We instead sealed off those districts and sent in engineers with flommers and entrenchment charges to clear the cultists block by block. It cost more guardsmen's lives than the gas would have, but it spared innocent Imperial citizens. Ironically, the death Chorus officers never chastised me for that decision. They accepted it with the same stoicism they accept all orders. To them, one method of expugning the enemy was as good as another so long as it eventually worked, even if it was more costly in their terms. Human life simply doesn't factor into their equations the way it does for others. Let me clarify something. It's not that the officers or troops are bloodthirsty madmen. That they genuinely do not grasp the value of their own lives beyond tools of war. They were raised to see themselves as weapons, not people. Their home, world's history all but ensured that mindset. I had to study it to understand them. The very name of the planet means war in an ancient Terran tongue, and never was a world more aptly named. An ancient Terran tongue, and never was a world more aptly named. Over 15 centuries ago, was a thriving hive world, productive and proud until it fell into the abyss of heresy. The details are shrouded by time and propagandist gloss. But we know that rulers betrayed the emperor, declaring independence and renouncing imperial rule. Civil war erupted, loyalists versus traitors, and the planet was doomed to tear itself apart. When all seemed lost, the loyalists took a final drastic measure: total atomic purgation.
The enigmatic split stone of Al-Nosla, from the puzzling stone circles of the Golan Heights, our path now leads deep into the scorching deserts of Saudi Arabia, a barren land filled with beauty and hidden history. Here, amidst endless dunes and under the unrelenting blaze of the sun, rises one of the world's strangest natural wonders, the Al-Nosla Rock. At first sight, the Al-Nosla formation seems almost unreal, more like the product of a sculptor's careful vision than the work of mere nature. Two gigantic sandstone blocks stand side by side, separated by a flawless, razor-straight vertical gap. The line is so neat and exact that it appears to have been cut by a modern laser instead of natural erosion. Each boulder is perched delicately on a small base, giving them a balanced, almost gravity-defying stance. What instantly captures attention is the sheer perfection of the split. Extending several meters downward, the dividing line is so sharp and straight that many onlookers question how such precision could occur naturally. Even professional geologists, well versed in thousands of examples of erosion and weathering, find themselves astonished by the accuracy of Al-Nosla's divide. Science offers explanations, tectonic activity, shifts in pressure, or wind and water erosion over time, yet none of these ideas satisfy everyone. The cleanness and symmetry of the separation seem too exact to fully accept as a coincidence of nature, leaving room for mystery and speculation. Adding further intrigue are the ancient carvings etched into the stone surface. These petroglyphs, thought to be several thousand years old, show animals, human figures, and abstract designs, a window into the lives of the desert's earliest people. But their presence raises more questions. Were the carvings connected to the strange split? Did those early artists see the rock as sacred, or could they even have been involved in shaping it? Some researchers have suggested that ancient civilizations may have possessed knowledge or technology far beyond what mainstream history credits them with. After all, even with modern equipment, cutting a stone of this size with such precision would be a challenge. Could it be that an earlier culture had access to techniques now lost to us? Traditional archaeology says the desert tribes of that era only used simple bronze and stone tools. Yet local Arabian legends tell a different story. Folklore speaks of ancient peoples with mysterious powers who could manipulate stone, softening it or reshaping it with ease. These tales often blend myth with memory, hinting at forgotten skills or advanced craftsmanship that defy conventional timelines. Scientific theories persist. Some experts suggest earthquakes long ago could have caused the rock to split so evenly, while others argue that volcanic heat and mineral weakening might explain the clean fracture. Still, none of these proposals fully convince skeptics, leaving the mystery open-ended. For the people who lived thousands of years ago, encountering such a formation must have been awe-inspiring. They may have seen it as a divine sign, a sacred landmark, or even a supernatural creation. Cultures across history have often treated unusual natural sites as holy places, and Al-Nosla certainly fits that pattern. Bedouin traditions even speak of powerful beings and master craftsmen leaving hidden signs in the desert, monuments meant to outlast time itself. Could Al-Nosla be one of these? A monument with its original meaning forever lost? Whatever its origins, whether crafted by nature, influenced by ancient hands, or a blend of both, the Al-Nosla rock continues to astonish and inspire. Travelers, historians, and scientists venture across the desert just to witness its perfection. Its strange, almost artistic appearance ensures that debates and theories will never cease. Perhaps one day, with new discoveries and advanced research, the true story of Al-Nosla will finally be revealed. But until then, it remains what it has always been. A silent riddle in stone, standing in the desert sun, waiting for humanity to unlock its secrets.
People are born and bred to fight, and they ask for the worst assignments. Stalemates that would bleed others dry. Sieges that could last decades. Battlefronts choked with poison gas and plagued by contagion. These they endure gladly, as if afraid peace might make them soft or worse, leave them idle with their ancestral guilt. How do they replenish such dreadful losses, you might wonder, from a world that is a toxic husk? There are dark whispers of secret birthing facilities deep underground, of vitae wombs and accelerated growth programs cloning that grown soldiers. The official records are silent, but the rumors persist. All I know is that the flow of fresh troops from never falters. No matter how many die, more arrive to take their place, seemingly unperturbed and indistinguishable from those who fell. I've peered at new reinforcements and sometimes thought I recognized faces as if the same souls come back again and again until duty is done. Maybe that's just fatigue playing tricks on my mind. Or maybe there's some truth to the cloning tales. Either way, they fight as men, they die as men, and I treat them as men, even if they consider themselves nothing more than expendable instruments of the Emperor's will. This deep history and conditioning explains much about my charges. It explains why they will sprint through open ground into oncoming fire without a second's hesitation. Why cowardice simply doesn't exist in their vocabulary, at least not for themselves. In truth, I've never once had to execute a guardsman for cowardice or desertion. Not once. The thought of deserting their duty is more alien to them than the Tyranids or Necrons we've faced. If anything, I worry far more about overzealous martyrdom than about anyone fleeing The few times I've drawn my bolt pistol on one of my own men were because he was trying to do something like climb out of the trench without orders, desperate to charge the enemy, ahead of schedule, or attempting to throw himself on a live grenade that I was still in the midst of kicking away. How do you threaten men who welcome death? The answer: you don't. You reason with them insofar as reason holds sway. You invoke the Emperor's grandeur. Strategy. You remind them that surviving a little longer can mean completing the mission. I've taken to lecturing soldiers that if you die now in vain, you deny the Emperor a victory later. That usually gets through because the only thing they fear, if they fear anything, is failure in their duty. Recall a time I actually raised my voice to a group of grenadiers who were preparing demolition charges on a bridge. Intelligence had come in that friendly infantry cadence, in fact, from a neighboring front, were in full retreat and might be falling back across that very bridge. The sappers were going to blow it anyway to halt an enemy advance. Friendlies be damned. I had to step in. I bellowed, "Hold your fire. Those are our brothers out there." They looked at me like I was speaking Zenith. One of them responded flatly, "Objective is to deny the bridge, sir." In their minds, orders were orders, no matter who might get caught in the crossfire. I had to physically put myself in front of the detonator and order them to wait until the last possible moment. We let the ragged stream of Cadian survivors scramble across and then blew the bridge with the enemy armor right on their heels. The grenadiers did not protest verbally. Kriegers rarely protest anything, but I could tell from their body language that they thought my actions borderline traitorous for deviating from the original plan. And had the delay allowed the enemy to capture the bridge, I suspect those same grenadiers would have expected me to pay with my life for that failure. They would have been right, too. Such is the knife's edge I walk, weighing human lives against mission success in a calculus that death course officers solve only ever in one way. That incident stuck with me because afterwards one of the Cadian sergeants, dirty and half-deafened, clasped my hand and thanked me. "Never thought I'd see a Commissar hold back the hammer," he said, voice trembling with exhaustion. "Emperor knows we owe you one." I didn't know how to respond. In the commissariat, we're used to being feared or at best grudgingly respected, but thanked by guardsmen almost unheard of. We are the ones who shoot their comrades for hesitating. Yet there I was, being lauded as a savior by one group of soldiers and quietly resented by another for the exact same act. I've never felt more the outsider than I did in that moment, standing between those who were relieved by my mercy and those who considered it misplaced. It's a lonely role being a commissar with the Death Corps. I am literally the only person in the regiment who isn't from the only one who can take off his mask and show a human face. In fact, in joint operations with other regiments, I often find myself functioning as the only approachable figure among the ranks. Inter-regimental briefings, Allied officers will gravitate to me, not to the silent colonels when they have questions or concerns. I'm the unofficial interpreter, not for language but for intent. I've had to explain to a bewildered commander from a more conventional unit that yes, if the major said he'll hold the line, he means to the last man, or to advise an adjutant that no, the Death Corps probably won't participate in the celebratory parade after the victory. They'll likely already be digging new trenches or asking for redeployment to the next war. These interactions reinforce my odd position. I straddle the world of the living and the world of those who behave as if they're already dead. One thing that often startles outsiders is the sheer faith and fatalism the Death Corps carry. They have a common saying, one they don't shout or wave around, but I've heard it whispered in their vox chatter and prayer circles. Only in death can the Emperor forgive us. To them, death in service isn't just expected, it's redemption. Every life given in the Emperor's name is a step toward absolution forgs ancient sin. I've even seen their field chaplain, often the quartermasters doubling as one, lead them in a litany before a particularly dire assault. To be a man in such times is to be already dead. We go happily to our fate that the Emperor's judgment upon may be lifted. It sends a chill through more normal soldiers, but the Kriegers bow their heads in solemn agreement. They truly believe that through death they are purified. I'd be lying if I said that level of devotion didn't affect me. After enough time among them, you start to internalize bits of their creed. Caught myself making the sign of the Aquala and murmuring, "Only in death does duty end," under my breath before climbing out of a trench, as if I too accepted that I'm already dead for the Emperor. That is a common imperial aphorism, sure, but it means something heavier here. I still value my life. Emperor knows I do, but I've become far more numb to the prospect of losing it. Seeing hundreds go willingly to their ends day after day will do that. The first time I saw a quartermaster in action was a revelation in just how far that dedication goes. In regiments, the quartermasters are a peculiar breed. Part medic, part executioner, part priest. After a battle, in most units, you'd have medici and stretcher-bearers frantically working to save who they can. On Krieg's battlefields, triage is swift and merciless. I remember stepping into a shattered basilica that had been converted to a forward aid station. The pews were lined with wounded guardsmen, or what was left of them. Groans of pain echoed off cracked Gothic arches. Steeled myself, expecting the usual chaos of Turins and orderlies. Instead, I found robed figures moving with eerie calm from soldier to soldier. I watched one quartermaster kneel beside a young Krieger whose lower torso was a mess of blood and burned flesh, a wound that was surely fatal. The quartermaster gently removed the man's identification tags and slipped a medallion depicting the Emperor into the dying soldier's hand. He spoke softly. I couldn't hear over the din, but I imagined words of absolution. Then, as serenely as a father putting a child to bed, the quartermaster drew a heavy last pistol and shot the soldier once square in the head. The body jolted, then lay utterly still. Emperor's peace, they call it. The quartermaster made the sign of the Aquila, then signaled two mute servitors to carry the corpse away to the side chamber where others were being collected. One of the servitors began stripping the body of usable gear even as it was being lifted. That was it. That was their version of compassion. Didn't cry out or interfere. What would have been the point? The man was beyond saving, and a quick death was kinder than bleeding out over hours. But the cold, businesslike manner of it, the total absence of ritual mourning beyond a 2-second prayer, chilled me. Another soldier on a nearby pew, half-conscious and missing an arm, saw the execution. Out of the corner of his eye. Did he flinch? No. He simply held out his own rifle toward the quartermaster, offering up his weapon in case he too would not be needing it. Throne, that sight will stay with me forever. In the Death Corps, they don't just expect to die. They plan for it even in their final moments. After many battles, I've become desensitized enough that I've performed the Emperor's peace myself once or twice. When no quartermaster was available, I uttered the same rote words, placed my bolt pistol against a loyal soldier's temple, and ended his suffering. Felt heavy but also strangely routine. I sometimes worry that my soul is weathering away, sloughing off bits of empathy to better fit in among these people. Or perhaps I'm just learning the grim pragmatism that war in the 41st millennium demands of all of us. Amidst all this darkness, what keeps me going? There are nights, or what passes for night under eternally polluted skies, when I lie in my dugout and stare at the metal ceiling, unable to sleep, wondering if I am making any difference at all. The weight of it can be crushing. The losses, the relentless pace of war, the sense that no matter what I do, the CRE will die in droves and call it a good day.